Great games at your table. I'm Jonathan Albin, and this is Game Master Soapbox, and today we're going to talk about play. What a surprise, right? This channel is based on making the games that you play at your house the best they can possibly be. Well, today we're going to actually talk about what it is that brings people to the table. But before we get started, make sure you go down below and press all the buttons so that the algorithm knows that you're part of our audience, and let's get started.
Absorbing damage is the name of the game. From the claws of monsters or the heat from a ball of flame. Our strength in numbers is a roll of the dice.
I'm sure that you clever viewers noted that I only included two possible facets to why people play. And yes, I intentionally left one of them out, and we're going to be talking about all three of them. But I left that one out because of perception. Players who are, or rather viewers who have been watching my channel for a while, have gotten the impression that somehow the purpose of roleplay is for the game master to be a entertainment source, a clown, a circus performer who draws the players in and is the sole purpose of getting together. And I'm wanting to make that really clear that that's not the case. We definitely need to consider all options when we're looking at what it is that you are doing to be a game master and what you are trying to provide to your players. But I want to make sure that we understand we're defining the adventure not from only the game master's position, although that's the seat that I have taken for myself for the last 50 years, but also to realize that the players actually are the ones who determine all kinds of facets of your game's experience and can make or break a game. We've had conversations before about how to handle difficult situations and such, and my videos and over that I've gone back and looked at, and quite frankly they're appalling because I wasn't very clear, I wasn't getting to the point, and I wasn't providing any useful information in those episodes in particular because I was so disjointed, mainly because of my excitement, but you'll see what I'm talking about as we go forward. So today we're going to be looking at players, what they bring to the table, what they expect from the table, and how they help to create the course, direction, and even the theme of the games group that you put together. So if you're a brand new game master and you have a group of brand new players, or if you are a player in a public setting such as I am on occasion, where you are running a game for the walk-ins, the people that have never played before, you're going to have a considerable number of players who are new to the game, don't have much of a handle on what actually is going on. And you'll have those few that have a reminiscence of the times in the past that they've played, but are coming back to the hobby and are looking for an experience that they only tangentially remember. So the new player will drive your story in at least a couple of ways. One of which is you'll be doing considerably more exposition. You'll be telling the story more than showing it, because you have to work through the mechanics of the game as well as set all of the background information. If you have the opportunity to do a session 0, you will find that this is less of a problem. But even so, as in my case, any given week I might have 3 or 4 new players sit down at the table who have never rolled a dice in a role-play environment at all. And so therefore we have to not only educate them in the mechanics, but also give them a solid framework to work from in building up what their actions will be within the game. The returning players and the new players also tend to bring a freshness to the table, and even your most veteran players enjoy playing with the new folks because there's comedy in watching people make mistakes. There's the entire banbanam of watching something bad happen to somebody else. But to a greater extent, it really is that we all really want to create more players anyway. We want more folks to play with, so we're going to be accommodating and patient. And I have found it just to be an exciting thing to have new players sit down at my table with my 12-year veteran, my my 17-year veteran and the like, who actually help them to not only play their characters, but to appreciate and enjoy what's happening even before they fully comprehend it. Of course, inevitably, you're going to have your players who literally are only there to rile up the others or to incite action. They've come to the table perhaps with a video game mentality, perhaps with a zest for life process, and there's also the experimenters, the you only live once folk, the YOLO, and the YOLOs and Leroy Jankins kind of run in the same circles, in that what they are looking for is the intensity of the experience and want to test the boundaries and limitations. What really is interesting is these make great drivers if only you can temper their enthusiasm with some perspective. So when you're dealing with the person who has this zest for life, this esprit de corps that just wants to hammer forward, provide them with perhaps some warning signs and references within the game that let them know how dangerous this can be. And then, of course, play the game out in such a way that they can appreciate it. As I've described on several occasions, my buddy Dave, who had the large group of characters, came to the table specifically to see how many different interesting ways he could die. And this is not necessarily conducive to a campaign story, but if the other players at the table are aware of this penchant, then it's easier for the rest of them to accept that we're going to have a new person all the time, because Dave's Jenkins' action is just going to take himself out again, and so be prepared for that. The ironic thing is that the Leroy Jenkins and the YOLOs tend to help the new players by showing them what happens, what the ramifications are when you go over that edge. Now, I speak of the Leroy Jenkins here not as the person who does something foolish by accident and therefore you're in a position where you don't feel that they are deserving of their comeuppance, but I'm talking about the person who literally looks you in the eye and says, yes, I want you to, I'm challenging you to do something about this. And again, it affords an opportunity for learning for the new players, and that person's always getting what they're wanting, which is the outrageous elimination process or whatever. Even if you get them toned down to where they're not going to that far, the Leroy Jenkins is the adventurer. He's the one that's going to push the envelopes, and he's going to draw the boundaries for your session, which helps to build the framework that you're going to be using for your players going forward. It's argued on both sides on whether the power gamer in your group is a benefit or a boondoggle. The concept of the power gamer, of course, is the person who's got the perspective that they can win at role-playing games, that they can beat the dungeon or defeat the dungeon master, and are also in the process of advancement. Now, in classic role-play games, this is rather a bit of a pressure because the players collectively are earning awards by what the group does, and these power gamers are by their own definition out for themselves. But what I have found to be the most useful way of capitalizing on the power gamer is that you fundamentally come up with a mechanism such as Nikos RPG, where the player's advancement is on their end, and that their advancement depends on their interaction within the game. So if they've got skills that represent dialogue and conversational skills, then you get them to do that in game and therefore practice with them so that they become more efficient at it. And when you help them reach their goals, they'll tend to help you with yours. And so therefore they end up being really good, I guess you'd say, adventure rails. Often the power gamers have disdain for the Leroy Jenkinses of the world they don't want to break they don't want to break the engine, but they want the engine to work efficiently, and so they are going to help you monitor the direction that the game goes in when you pair up your power gamers with the Leroy Jenkins. Pardon me. In addition, the very concept that the Leroy Jenkins are looking for the door out, so to speak, really will cause the power gamer to think twice about what they're doing, and therefore acts as a filter or a kind of a pump the brakes kind of mode for the games group, for those to be tied up together so that they're integral to each other's success. So they tend to self-moderate. Of course, there's going to be that 1 or 2 or 5 people in your group that really dig into the rules mechanisms that you're using. Perhaps they've studied it. And of course, a rules litigant can be a lot of different things. The classic rules lawyer who simply wants the rules to be followed, compared to the person that wants to be sort of prosecutorial and wants to push the envelope on what the rules actually say, compared to the way they are nominally played week over week. I had, for example, a recent conversation with a player about the rules about injury, and the person was staggered to find out that the fundamental damage mechanism only functionally provides 1, 2, or 3 points of damage per engagement, and those numbers seemed extremely low to them because they're used to, working in the 80%, 90% of their hit points threshold. And all I had to do is point out that the mechanism for injury does take a certain will. You have to want to harm, and that's itself needs to be somewhat regulated. And so by having rules that provide for safety barriers to the game's success or failure, then the rules lawyer actually tends to help you by reinforcing those elements in play, because as the occurrences happen and the players want to react to it, you're able to therefore provide an additional explanation for the reason why it's happening this particular way. So it helps to refine and define the very games world that you're in. Now, there are those who would argue that a rules litigant or a rules lawyer is going to be drawing down on the fun of your adventure, and I posit the opposite theory, that they instead bring up situations that point out ludicrous behavior and help the players to see the value of considering what their actions are going forward, and therefore can provide a greater direct connection with the mechanism that you're using. Now, we all have them. The wallflower, the person that comes into the games group, has zero self-confidence, zero public presence, and merely started off as a viewer, as a sightseer, or as I described in my first screen, the idea of being a participant, but only at the viewership level. And the benefit of a wallflower is they are a filter. They tend to slow the action down. If the wallflower, for example, brings up a question, it must be pretty important for them to have even noticed or even want to be drawing attention to themselves. But the benefit of a wallflower is that there are parts of the story that are nuanced and that you include in your description, and it's the wallflower that's going to catch those. It's the person who's not focused on the main line of the story, but instead is observing the background, the scenery, the architecture, and appreciating what's going on in the story at a different level. On the downside, a wallflower really is fundamentally the equivalent of a new player, in that they're not looking for their direct interaction. They're wanting to see how the game works, not necessarily what they are going to do. But knowing that you have wallflowers means you can also provide them with the amount of spotlight that they desire. And arguably, it's a great way to assist the wallflower in expanding into new areas of gameplay. And the reality is that most people won't want to be in the wallflower category forever. They just want to stay safe until they are ready to make the commitment to the action. And being aware of the wallflower, recognizing and acknowledging them in the group, and still eliciting from them their opinion from time to time, you actually help them to develop and expand their reach and their desire to be in part of the game. Okay, now this is an older term, and you may not have heard it before, but a grognard is somebody. The term comes from, of course, you hear the word grog in there. It has to do with the idea of going down to the pub and drinking and telling tales. A grognard historically is considered to be someone who has a war games background in particular, but it doesn't necessarily. It could also be a long-time role player who's a veteran of 1,000 wars before, has sat at hundreds of tables. Your veteran player who is going to want to game the situation. They're going to want to figure out optimal positioning. They're going to consider what the tactics of the team should be and what the strategy going through the adventure could possibly develop into. And so therefore they are great for holding the gravity of the situation in hand. The dependence for them on you as a game master is for you to transfer to them the level of intensity you are providing and what they can expect from your table. And by having a great relationship with the grognards, you're able to smooth over the difficult passages of the mechanics of the rules, perhaps, but more to the point, you can have an explanation more readily available to the players for what's going on in the scenes, because the grognard's going to have his finger right on the scale and know exactly what's going on where and keep track of everybody's participation in the scene in a much more effective way. Now, I have to say, originally I was just going to call this a lone wolf, but every time I think of a lone wolf that's in a games group setting, I have to think of the movie Mystery Men, and Mr. Furious has this issue that he wants to be the lone wolf in a group, but he also wants to be alone. And the idea here is that you have those people who want to solve the puzzle, want to be instrumental in guiding the story, but perhaps don't want to be the ones who actually throw the punches and flip the switches. So a lone wolf alone is fundamentally a mastermind that just hasn't yet clicked with the group. And allowing the lone wolf to participate with the group and actually guiding them, you can actually develop a very, very stable group leader in the eventuality that they finally recognize the value of the group. And that really comes from the very trust elements that come from ongoing play. As you may know, I'm a big fan of the long tail story, the saga that lasts multiple years, let alone a few weeks. But the lone wolf alone will normally be best suited in the one-shots, because he will be a driver when you have no others, and having at least one driver in the group will help to push the story down its progression. Again, whether it's linear or non-linear, whether it's sandbox or a light rail, the idea is that the lone wolf is going to be interested enough in the story that they will help to push the story awareness, if not actually the storyline. Of course, the biggest and most common of your player elements are going to be story shepherds. In other words, they are trying to resolve the puzzle. They work together for the most part, coordinate their efforts. The story shepherd can become problematic if their perception of the story is not precisely where you were headed as a storyteller, and therefore you run into differentiation of interpretations of what happened in particular scenes. Now, you need a story shepherd, at least one. And in some certain stories, it's good to have a group of them. But the story shepherd's desire is to get the feedback that he's getting it, that he's driving the story in the way you want it to go. And for the most part, the short story shepherds can be a positive thing. I only mention them in particular in this context because a story shepherd that has gone off the base is fundamentally the equivalent of what we used to call an evil genius, but we'll talk about that later. I'm not saying that a shepherd is evil, but the idea is that if the story doesn't go where the story shepherd wants it to go, sometimes they will exert pressure on the story, either through the other players or through narrative that they create to drive the story in the direction they want it to go. And that's only problematic if it's counter to the overarching story that you have already built for. And it really has more to do with them diverting from their original course. But now I'm digressing into petty squabbles. The action magnet is fundamentally one of the first elevations, if you will, of your new player. When a new player finally gets what's going on in the story, he wants to be a part of every scene. And so someone else will be involved in the scene, something will happen, and the action magnet will immediately respond as if he is in the scene, whether it's even possible for him to be there or not. The idea is that they just so get wrapped up in the engagement of role play that they fail to see where those boundaries are that define when they are in the scene and when they're not. And so it's endemic to the new player. He's going to be at some point an action magnet, but it's also a great learning place. The biggest thing is that you're able to see that your story is connecting when players jump in and want to be a part of a particular scene, because it means that they were listening and were intent enough to put themselves in that place. And all it really is required, generally speaking, is to have conversations about the process and also to be clear about where they are at the beginning of the scene, so that they are aware that everybody else is aware that they are physically not there, and therefore they'll eventually begin to self-regulate and more than likely will move into one of the driver positions. So now as we're coming to the close of this, did I miss anybody? Was there any particular game playing type that happens in your game that I didn't mention? I'd love to hear from you. Make sure you leave a comment down below and let me know what it was that I missed, and perhaps I'd also like to hear from you your take on the ones that I've described. Which of the player types are you? What is it that you are looking for in the game, and how do you contribute or adapt the games group that you're in to reach your level of satisfaction and to get from the game what you're looking for? As you may recall, I record these videos generally a couple times a day, 5 days a week. And so if you have any questions or comments, make sure you leave them in the comment section below, or you can reach out to me through our Discord, which is listed associated with this. Otherwise, I will see you in the next episode. I'm Jonathan Albin. As Grandpa would say, go play.